To help prepare him for the final confrontation, the gods send many signs to strengthen and reassure Odysseus. Hello and welcome back. My name is Zachary May, and today we are reading the great books of Western civilization, continuing with the Odyssey. This is the Robert Fagles translation, Book 20, and as always, I'll begin with a brief plot summary before getting into analysis and commentary. Odysseus tosses and turns, restless as he tries to figure out how to succeed against so many men. Athena appears and assures him that he will be successful as long as she is at his side. She helps him fall asleep. At that very moment, Penelope awakens. Weeping, she prays to the goddess Artemis for death, for she had dreamt her husband was beside her once again, and she can now remember him vividly. She'd rather die now than live to marry some other man. Even as she cries, though, dawn arrives, and Odysseus awakens, having experienced a similar dream. He kneels and prays for signs from Zeus to prove that he really was supposed to return to his native land. Zeus hears him and looses a thunderbolt through the clear sky. A woman, close at hand, comments on this odd event aloud. Believing it must be a sign in answer to someone else's prayer, she adds her own, that the suitors may eat their last meal in the palace of Odysseus on this very day. Odysseus takes heart at these signs as the rest of the house awakens. The serving women begin to clean and cook. Telemachus finds his spear and sword before seeking his father, and Eumaeus arrives from his hut to check on the beggar. As the two converse, Melanthius the goatherd appears once again to insult and threaten the beggar. Next to arrive is Philoetius, the cowherd. He begins speaking with Eumaeus and the beggar, spontaneously beginning to lament his master's likely demise, his rage at the suitors' insolence, and his willingness to take up arms against them if only Odysseus were to return. The beggar predicts he will get his wish. Meanwhile, the suitors observe a prophetic bird sign as they approach the palace. Amphinomus quickly reads it as an omen that they should not kill Telemachus, that they would surely fail, and they should focus on feasting instead. Telemachus announces to all the suitors gathered in the hall that there is to be no brawling or misbehavior today, otherwise there will be war. Athena prompts one of them to immediately test his words by hurling a cow's hoof at the beggar. It misses, but Telemachus makes good on his promise and declares that had the hoof hit the beggar, he would have speared the man on the spot. He makes a laundry list of all the suitors' outrages and his willingness to fight and die to protect what is his, though he knows he would not win against so many. Despite this, the suitors respect his wishes and leave the beggar and the rest of the servants alone for the day. They do, however, reiterate their wish that Telemachus would convince his mother to pick one of them for a husband at last. They are met with the same answer as always. Penelope is free to marry whenever she pleases, but Telemachus refuses to kick her out before then. Athena causes the suitors to begin uncontrollably laughing. They appear unhinged and insane for a moment. Theoclymenus, the prophet, sitting nearby, declares this to be an omen of their impending deaths before departing to stay with Telemachus' comrade in town once more. The suitors mock the prince for his choice of guests, but Telemachus keeps his attention fixed on his father, awaiting a signal to begin fighting. Penelope sits by the door of the hall, listening to all that goes on, also waiting. Homer declares that both goddess Athena and man, Odysseus, are preparing a feast to spread before the suitors soon. "Impossible, man," Athena bantered, the goddess's eyes ablaze. "Others are quick to trust a weaker comrade, some poor mortal far less cunning than I. But I am a goddess. Look, the very one who guards you in all your trials to the last." Odysseus, despite all of his confidence in front of his son, is having a moment of doubt. He's not sure that he will succeed. He's been promised the gods' help, and he's urged his son to trust in this multiple times, but even so, he's not sure himself. There are at least two different kinds of trust. Passive trust is where you believe that someone will do something for you, something that you personally have no control over. This would be like a child's trust in his parents to care for them. Then there's active trust. The trust fall, the leap of faith. Someone promises that they will do something for you, but they can't do it until you make the first step, until you make yourself vulnerable before them. It was easy enough to go ahead and allow Athena to turn Odysseus into a beggar. That was more passive trust. Odysseus, now figuratively standing on the edge of a cliff, is struggling with active trust. So he asks several times, first of Athena and then of Zeus, "Will you really catch me?" And, as we see, they oblige this doubt with many signs. Athena reassures him in person, as I read earlier, but then, not very long after, he asks for two very specific signs from Zeus. Father Zeus, if you really willed it so to bring me home over land and sea, after all the pain you brought me, show me a sign, a good omen voiced by someone awake indoors, and then another sign outside from Zeus himself. And Zeus thundered at once. Then a woman close at hand spoke an omen for her master. Zeus, surely it's a sign you're showing someone now. Grant my prayer as well. Let these suitors now eat their last. Odysseus' heart leapt up, the man convinced he'd grind the scoundrels' lives out in revenge. Odysseus isn't the only one receiving signs of what is to come, though. The suitors, for their part, despite already being doomed, get several warnings. First, they see a bird sign as they're walking to the palace. This bird sign is of an eagle clutching a dove in its talons. Remember, the eagle symbolizes Zeus, but if you remember last book, it can also symbolize Odysseus, like in Penelope's dream. And what's more, they actually read the omen correctly. They see this and believe that it's a signal that they would fail to kill the prince if they tried. That's not wrong, that's actually correct. But they don't take it far enough. They don't ask the question, why would they fail to kill the prince? He's here, at home after all. If they would fail because he ran away, so much the better for them. But they don't think that far. The second warning is in the hall, when Athena sets off mad, hysterical laughter in the suitors, and Homer tells us the meat they were eating oozed red with blood. Tears flooded their eyes, hearts possessed by grief. It's this sight that leads Theoclymenus, the prophet, to predict their deaths for the second time that day. Poor men, night shrouds your heads. Ghosts, look, thronging the entrance, thronging the court, go trooping down to the world of death and darkness. Remember this description when we get to book 24. It's almost exactly what happens. But anyways, they don't believe him either, and they miss the point of his words. The last sign, if you want to call it that, is when Philœtius the cowherd shows up and says out loud, for no apparent reason, to Odysseus himself, how much he wishes he could fight the suitors once Odysseus returns, if he were to return. It's not a common sentiment, not even amongst the loyal servants like Eumaeus. He's never once said that. So why does the cowherd say it? Well, it's either a kind of a lapse in believability, in suspension of disbelief from Homer to his audience, or it's a sign from the gods meant to encourage Odysseus. While Athena continues to goad the suitors on into more and more insults against Telemachus and Odysseus, we get a chance to see just how much Telemachus has grown. Remember that at the very beginning of the epic, he was daydreaming that somehow, someday, his father might come home and solve his problems for him. Then he gets advice and guidance from Athena, some experience from his travels, and from speaking to Nestor and Menelaus. And now, with his father back, his father's presence gives him additional security and a greater ability to trust that he's not alone. So he speaks the truth to the suitors that he's been too afraid to say in the past, with greater strength than ever before. This is Odysseus' house. My father won it for me, so it's mine. You suitors control yourselves. No insults now, no brawling, no, or it's war between us all. He sets a boundary. He's not just begging them to stop what they're already doing, what they've already been doing. He's stating definitively where the line is and what happens if it is crossed. This is far less control and free reign of the situation than the suitors are used to, I'd say, which is part of why Ctesippus tests him immediately. Once he does so, though, Telemachus makes good on his threat. You can thank your lucky stars you missed. I would have planted my sharp spear in your bowels. I'm alive to it all now, the good and the bad. The boy you knew is gone. I'd rather die than have to look on at your outrage day by day, guests treated to blows, men dragging the serving women to our noble house, exploiting them all, no shame. This confirms everything that we had heard before about the suitors' behavior with the servants, by the way. They are understandably stunned, so much so that they agree, although perhaps mockingly, to behave. This same confidence that Odysseus struggles to have in himself, in Athena, in Zeus, Telemachus unflinchingly has in himself and his father, which is where he gets the resolve to be able to step out on a limb like this. Penelope prays to Artemis, asking for death. She wants to die with the image of Odysseus fresh in her mind and not have to marry someone else. The goddess Artemis, by the way, was known to bring illness and sudden death to girls and to women. However, this request is ignored. Or maybe it's just transformed and delegated to someone else. Because after all, Apollo was known to bring illness and sudden death to boys and men. And oddly enough, this chapter of the Odyssey takes place on his feast day. There's at least two more reasons why it's fitting that Apollo is the one whose feast day it is, and the one to whom Penelope's prayer is redirected, if it is. Firstly, he's the god of archers, and as we know, Penelope's going to bring out the bow of Odysseus for the suitors to try and fail to string. Secondly, we know from Glenn Arbery's essay, The Sacrifice of Achilles, that Apollo is the one who always keeps the boundaries between mortals and gods, who always stands up and pushes back when someone is pushing the limits of what is acceptable, especially in the Iliad. Recall Diomedes in the Iliad acting like a god, or Patroclus trying to act like Achilles, or Achilles acting like a beast. All three times, they were pushing the bounds of what is acceptable to their nature, and all three times, Apollo is the one who pushes them back. Now, the suitors have definitely been pushing against the bounds of decency, of hospitality, which is protected by Zeus, remember? And now that Telemachus is standing up for himself more, they're even pushing the bounds of what is peaceful. So it's very fitting that on Apollo's feast day, Athena and Odysseus prepare a feast for them. Or maybe just desserts. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Also, comment down below and let me know if you were in Odysseus's shoes and you saw all of these signs that we saw in this book of the Odyssey, would that be enough for you to trust that you're meant to act today? Or would you still want to wait? Would you find some other way to find the resolve to act? Let me know down below. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.